success looks like a fancy degree, a big house, a shiny, luxurious car, fancy title, whether you're married or not, do you have children or not? Those are all basically boxes on my checklist that I was given to check off. And at one point, I remember just thinking to myself, is this it? I mean, why do I feel so unfulfilled and so guilty for feeling unfulfilled? Because on the outside, I had an Instagram perfect life. And on the inside, I was quietly unraveling.
Welcome back to the Time Freedom Podcast, where you can learn how to rethink your work and your money to create a life you love right now. Join us for insights to help you find meaningful freedom so you can choose how and when and with whom you work for as long as you want. Here are your hosts, me, Brian Harriott, and Kirby Dennison. Today we welcome Dr. Seema Desai. She's a keynote speaker, author, certified coach, and creator of the Joy First Method. She helps high-performing, mission-driven leaders use joy as a strategy, not as a reward, to reach their next level of success without burning out. Very cool. A specialist in performance and well-being, she's the author of Connected, Discovering Your Inner Guides, and formerly co-host of the award-winning podcast Happy and Human. You should check it out. Though no longer practicing clinically, Dr. Desai is a trained general dentist who serves patients across Central and South Texas. She blends science, lived experience, and grounded wisdom to help people transform pressure into purpose. She lives in Austin, along with her husband and her 2 children. Hello and welcome back to the Time Freedom Podcast. And I want to welcome Dr. Seema Desai, who's joining us today. And I'm very excited to have you for a couple of reasons. One is that we're recording on a Friday, and on Monday, my son got sick. And I thought I just knew I was going to go down for the count sometime this week. But I made it. I made it to Friday and didn't get sick, so we can have this interview. But more than that, Seema, you and I met in January, I'm thinking it was. Mm-hmm. First virtually, and then we hung out in person a couple of times through the speaking program that we're a part of, Heroic Public Speaking. And I've just gotten to know you over the course of that time, and I like you bit more every time I meet you. And then we started to talk about the concepts of time freedom, and I think you have a really interesting perspective to share with the listeners today. So that's why I'm especially excited to have you here today.
Yeah, well, I was lit up inside the moment I heard what you were writing about and talking about. And I think it really goes hand in hand with, what I talk about and what I care about. And so I think it's such a necessary ideal that doesn't have to be ideal, right? It can be very accessible, approachable concept that all of us can use in some way, shape, or form to live just really honestly a more fulfilling life, a healthier life. What good is creating all of these little successes that we say are important if we're too busy and too sick to enjoy them?
And I can't wait to have you share more about your thinking and how you approach this, because I think it'll be really valuable for everyone to hear.
Yeah.
But before we get into the cool, deeper stuff, we like to ask questions of each other. I don't know, shock us into having a more relaxed conversation. I don't know why we do this.
Like cold plunge.
Yeah, there you go.
I've never cold plunged. Have you cold plunged?
No, I have never cold plunged.
Have you, Kirby? No. Okay. This is definitely on my bucket list for 2026, like Q1 of 2026. I've done it in like 60-degree water, but there's like a very specific way you have to know how to breathe if you're going to do this in 40-degree water. And so I'm going to check it out.
I'm just impressed that you know the different temperature gradients that
I've been thinking about it for a while. So
I should probably learn from you, because there is a cold plunge bath in the gym that I just joined, and I see it there. Yeah. I don't know if, I just haven't
mocking you.
It is it totally is. There's just all these signs about like, we want you to tell on each other if you notice people don't take a shower before they go in it. And I'm like, if there's signs on there like that, I'm not getting in that thing.
I know. That is the one thing where I'm like, I don't know that I want to do this in a public thing, but I've done research. I think there's a place near my house that like UV cleans the water, and I don't know. We'll see.
Nice.
Stay tuned.
Yes. I mean, there's so many benefits from it, but I don't like the cold, so I'm probably out.
Me either.
You'll have to do the sauna thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we asked 3 questions, and you can pick one, and we can go into it. And then Kirby and I will try to, address our answers as well. But they simply are, either what's something few people know about you, who's changed the trajectory of your life, whether they know it or not, and kind of how. And then is there a belief that you've changed, that you no longer believe, or you now believe that you didn't earlier in life as you've gotten older and wiser?
I feel like I want to answer all of those questions, but I will pick number 2. The person who changed
Yeah.
my life the most, I would say, is my husband. And the reason I say that is because it's just when I look at how we met and what happened afterward, it feels like I've never seen this movie, but I've heard of it. The sliding glass doors or something where you
Oh, sliding doors.
sliding doors, right? Where you
Yes.
pick one way and like your life turns out totally different than the other way. And right before I met him, it was in February and I was supposed to meet some really good friends of mine for a Galentine's, like we're swearing off men, we're single, all the things. And we're 20 years old and infinitely wise at that age. And my friend was like, okay, well, so next week, like you can't actually have a date. Like you can't be with anybody. And I kind of scoffed and I was like, whatever, Neha, like, I don't know where you think I'm going to meet some guy in like a week's time. So I was living at home with my parents, going to college, very, very strict South Asian home. And I kind of rolled my eyes at it. And lo and behold, bam, I meet this guy. And that was that. That was for both of us. We just sort of connected and life has never been the same in the best way possible.
It's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. I could kind of say the same, but I'm not going to pick my wife. Kirby, do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
Go ahead.
When you said that, one of the first people that came to my mind was my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Z. How cool is that, by the way? Mrs. Zahorik. And I don't know, I just loved her. I actually, I think over like the Christmas break, it was very important for me to like make a gift for my teacher. How are you? You're like, what, 5?
5.
Yeah, you're like 5 years old. And I painted this picture of a Santa and the mittens were hanging down and there was like drips coming off the mittens. And I gave this to her. And the only reason I even know about it is because when I graduated high school, she gave it back to me as like a present. And I'm like, oh, and it was Santa with drippy mittens. Yeah, but she just really, I don't know, I just had a connection with her and she really, brought the best out of me. And I think probably made me a good student through the rest of the years of my schooling. Yeah. Shout out to Mrs. Z.
I love that.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many people to pick from. I would say my husband, but I picked him last week. So
Yep,
gonna have to
cross
change
it off.
that one up. I would say actually the first person that came to my mind when Dr. Seema, you were talking about college was when I was in college, I shadowed a veterinarian at one of our local vets here. And my degree's in pre-vet.
Yeah.
I was planning to go to vet school, the whole thing. And I just remember him telling me, you have to be okay with being in debt pretty much your whole life. And between the cost of school and then he had his own practice and just the technology ever changing, he's like, you have to be okay with that. And I wasn't okay with that. And so I was like, I'm glad that he told me that before I, spent another 5 years in school. And so now I have a pre-vet degree that I don't use and it's been great.
That's important.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for entertaining us.
I feel like we could talk about all of these answers in depth and then go back and answer the other 2 questions in depth. But
Yeah.
I know we don't have.
Well, if we do, what keeps us from doing
Maybe
it? We'll yeah, maybe we will.
Ironically, on the Time Freedom podcast, listeners.
Exactly. Exactly. We'll spend our time however we want. So before we start off, can you give the listeners just your quick demographics? Because I sometimes find that helps people kind of place, oh, okay, this is person like me, or this is someone I could be like, or this has nothing to do with me. I'm going to skip to the next episode.
Yeah, totally fine.
If you could do that for
Bye. Don't skip. Don't dismiss another human being. They're equally valid. So, okay, I am a mid-40s something, not quite mid-40s. I'm not going to give myself extra years. I live in Austin, Texas with my husband and 2 children who are, it pains me to say, both in middle school and one is headed to high school next year. But they are the light of my life. In fact, I would say behind my husband, my son is the one that really, truly changed my life, but he was also the one that challenged me the most. Kirby talking about degrees that you don't use. I have a doctor of dental surgery. I don't remember the last time I picked up a scalpel or sutured somebody shut. But, that's something that is my background. I grew up in a South Asian household, small town Texas. My parents are first gen blue collar Indian immigrants. and they moved here because they wanted a better life for me and for themselves. So I was born in the States, but grew up as one of the quote unquote the onlys. So it was a very small town, but then within that town of demographics, there weren't a lot of, forget South Asian, but Indian community members. Most of those community members were physicians. My parents, like I said, were blue collar. My dad owned an auto repair shop for years. And I grew up with a very, very much a work hard. Stress is something that's inescapable. Success looks like a fancy degree, a big house, a shiny, luxurious car, fancy title, whether you're married or not, do you have children or not? Those are all basically boxes on my checklist that I was given to check off. And at one point, I remember just thinking to myself, is this it? I mean, why do I feel so unfulfilled and so guilty for feeling unfulfilled? Because on the outside, I had an Instagram perfect life. And on the inside, I was quietly unraveling and I couldn't figure out why or even how I got there. You like get into a car and you drive that same route and you're like, I don't remember driving here at all. And that was what my life was like. Long story short, through a series of very painful explorations and challenges with postpartum depression after my son was born, really had to do some soul searching and deep digging and had to be okay with cutting off things that were stable or made sense in an effort to figure out what it meant to live a meaningful life.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like the timeline? Now you're a coach, how did that happen? I'm sure we always tend to coach our earlier versions of ourselves. So I'm a little curious about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because that's exactly the audiences that I speak to and the people that I work with and coach are just that earlier versions of me. People who are high performers who, are inherently successful because they've created that in one way, shape, or form. And now are like, what, And so, yeah, that was pretty much, I was very, very laser focused on getting that degree. So by the time I was 25, I had my DDS and I had married the perfect guy who also was this good Indian boy who was a doctor and came from a good family and, all the parent approved things. And thank God we actually loved each other. Otherwise, I really don't know how things would have gone. He was in training and I was the one working full time, but still less than him. Because when you're a resident, you work all the time and you get paid peanuts. But I was earning a 6-figure salary and working an 8 to 5, basically. And so that's what kind of created our initial sense of what we thought it would look like to feel successful and everything. But that sense of I'm missing something, I wasn't really conscious of it. And I kept thinking, oh, I know why. It's the practice. It's the location. It's the type of patients. Oh, I know why. It's because I need to be a mom. That's why. So when I had Arjun, our son, and I got hit in the face with this postpartum depression. First of all, there's many reasons why people end up in situations like that. But I think there is very much a part of it that was like, I just didn't have the life skills to think about things in a way that was going to serve me instead of just take away. That's not the only reason, of course. So I had this baby boy and I'm trying to figure it out. I was becoming increasingly angry and then I would have guilt at that anger, especially when, this kid, I remember he was like 5 months old at the time and just screaming my head off at him to stop crying. And I'm going, what are you doing? Like he doesn't know. And then Anyway, just a series of, okay, so if this isn't working, then what is? And I found yoga and that I tell people saved my life. And the more you practice something, it, permeates into different parts of your life. And so these little things that I was learning about myself while I would give myself time to practice on the mat. One day I just decided to leave dentistry because I had no other option it just felt like I was suffocating. So I left with no plan. And then thank God, because the pandemic happened right then. So I was home and present for these kiddos and I hired a coach for myself. That was the first time I ever got coached. And, I talk about it in my speech. I feel like once you start to kind of align in what values bring you joy, life starts to happen for you. And I really, a publisher approached me to author a book. And so I did. And then coaching school, the opportunity to do that fell into my lap. And so I did that. And then I started a coaching business. And then I met all these new people doing these really cool things. And I launched a podcast and we did that for a couple of years and it was really fun. And, through all that, then we both found heroic public speaking, and that's been something that I've added to my list of things. And so it's just been one thing after another, but I call it following the breadcrumbs. No plan, just
Oh, yeah.
following the breadcrumbs.
I love that. You almost kind of just went, you would go where the opportunity presented itself. And if you tried it out and you didn't like it, then you'd discard it and look for the next thing. I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Or even just keep it, right? Not necessarily even discard it, but yeah.
I was thinking as you were describing, and maybe this ties into joy, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on this. But as I was researching my book, I came across, it's not called the smile curve. It's what I ended up calling it, where it was this large study that spanned Europe and the United States. And it measured like the happiness levels of people, like through their lives. And people were generally happy in their 20s. And then as it hit down to the 40s and 50s, it dipped. Eventually, it wasn't all bad news. It came back up later, I think, as people got older and maybe were able to reflect. But it's like these, when we go through this in our late 30s and our 40s, and we've been working hard and we know what we're doing. We just maybe don't know why we're doing it. And it's compounded with this lower level of happiness. Like you're kind of stuck in this trough. And like, it sounds like you're almost like forced to face it and push through the next stage. And then you realize what's important. And then, then we get back into, well, how do you do what's important? It's find time to work on it. So I don't know if that resonates with you.
And, I think that's what really gets me not in a like angry way, but in a, my heart goes to people who are really right in that demographic. And they're like, I don't have time. I don't have time
Yes.
to, be the one to take my kid to their swim class, their swim lesson, or I don't have time to cook a nutritious meal. So we order out all the time. I don't have time to whatever it may be. And I think, there's just so many people who fall into that. And it's funny, we were at a conference, my husband and I, a couple of years ago, and it was a physician wellness conference. And one of the women that we were speaking to was like asking my husband, oh, are you, how long have you practiced? And he said 15 years. And she goes, oh, so are you about done? Are you burnt out? And he's like, oh gosh, no, I'm just getting started. And it threw her. It really did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think for many people who are in those ambitious roles, things like law or finance or medicine, burnout is something that's very real. Time scarcity is something that's very real. And I kind of laugh. We joke. There are days where my husband does like a 5-minute meeting in the morning, and that's it. He's done for the day. He'll go golfing or he'll clean the pool or whatever he does. And it's like being semi-retired.
I would love to dive deeper here because this is definitely a type of listener here, right? Like a successful person who makes decent money, but is in this job that is high demanding. And how did you realize it, or what specifically were you able to do? Like, what if you were to advise this type of listener, like what's one little thing they could do? I don't know, however you want to take it. I feel like there's any tactical type things here or whatever would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, well, I think, knowing again what your priorities are and then actually sticking to them. Brian, when you and I went to dinner a few weeks ago, you were like, what was the thing that kind of really got you to think about this? I don't think I was conscious of it, but I remember being 15 and one of the aunties and uncles, the couples that I grew up with, right, in my parents' community, very successful. The guy was a physician. The kids were also graduated, married, both, high achieving professionals. And the uncle got sick. He had cancer and then he died. And they were just they were the couple that I wanted to be. They were so happy. And I want to talk about, that happiness versus joy, but they just were living this life that I craved. They would take ballroom dancing and they would go to the gym together and they would take walks and they would cook together.
Oh, wow.
And I had this ideal of like, yeah, I want that. And neither of us were conscious of wanting that when we met in your 20s or whatever. But my husband he's a pediatric critical care physician. And so what that means is that you never want your child to ever have to see this person. This is way sicker than the ER. Kids die all the time. And some of it is preventable. Some of it is not. And those are the ones where, you come home. And I think it really gave him perspective. I remember this time where he was like swamped at work, but he had like an 11-month-old pass away. And he came home and our kids were around the same age. One was crying and one was this, and I was at my rope's end. And he was able to say, you know what? this isn't a problem. We get to work through this because that 11-month-old, like that mom's never going to be able to see another day with them. And I think him doing what he does really helps him create perspective. The benefit is that it's shift work. So inherently, it's not an 8 to 5 job. And now, I mean, years later, he's in charge of the schedule. So, but everyone still pulls their own weight. And I think what he does beautifully is he won't hire someone for their team unless they're clear that they need to be whole as a person before they show up to the hospital to take a shift. That's really actually a core value for that group. And that's why they're so successful. So I think just knowing perspective, knowing, do I want to have children, or what do I want to be as a parent to my child? What do I want my health to look like? What do I want my marriage to look like? What are things that I want to do that I'm telling myself I can't do until I'm retired? And how can I do them now? Maybe it's just taking a single ballroom dancing class, or maybe it's like, I don't know, planting a tiny little garden instead of a big one that you imagine, but just do something small now. Don't put it off because you'll find the time.
I love it. Yeah. And what I also heard in there too is he in his example was able to move his career more towards more control. Like as he moved up, he became in charge of the schedule, and that helps. And obviously for people who are starting lifestyle businesses or, small endeavors, that's another way that you can gain control over how you spend your time, and which is basically your path.
Exactly. I mean, I was working part-time by the time I left dentistry. It wasn't fulfilling me. And so I went to part-time, and part-time was great. And then you have to answer, I think, however you feel about it. For women, I think this tends to come up more than men, although it certainly can and does. How present am I for my children? And what does that look like? I personally knew I didn't want to hire a nanny. And then, okay, so then the choice is if he's going to be working these odd hours, while, there's a lot of time that he's home, but there's also a lot of time that he's not, then what does that mean for me? Well, I'm going to choose then from a place of empowerment. I'm choosing to leave and trust that I'll be able to figure it out. And so I think that's really important too, is to give yourself the space. And now, having built this business, I do take Fridays completely off normally. And then when I do want to do something fun, like get a massage or go to lunch, or if I have a well check or whatever it is that it doesn't impede on my work, I don't feel guilty about cutting into it. And if I decide to work on that day, then I decide to work on that day, and it's an active choice. But building that time blocking into how I do things is really important too. And I think the other one last thing I'll say is, I think people, myself included, I'm actively unwiring this fallacy of the more time I put in, the more successful I will be in terms of just hours, right? Like if I work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, then the success that I'm looking to create will get here faster, or will get here at all. And I think if we can just work backwards and say, okay, I can still get there equally, if not faster, if I just invest 2 or 3 hours a day, but I'm approaching it with a totally refreshed attitude. You're actually bending time. Quantum physics will tell us we're bending how we experience things and how fast we allow things to come to us rather than grinding it out.
I love that. I've heard it described almost also in terms of where you are in your working life. If you're just coming out of school, hustling and putting in more hours is the way that you can differentiate yourself.
Sure.
But then eventually you gain the skills and the network and the ideas. And then as you get further along, there's different ways to differentiate yourself. And it's not just by putting in more hours.
Right. I think people just don't ever come away, break from that. Like you're no longer a resident. You're no longer a first-year attorney, but we operate as if we are.
A lot of the discussion after time freedom is what do you do with time freedom? And it always, purpose, intention, happiness, joy, those things come up. And I've never really talked, kind of pull those apart a little bit. And so I was wondering, given your expertise, if you could help me understand that, like around the joy and the happiness.
Yeah. So happiness, we're taught to pursue it. It's baked into the United States Constitution. But happiness, it's fleeting, it's finicky, and it's entirely dependent on our external circumstances. The research in positive psychology shows that our external circumstances, so things like the status of our career, our bank account, even our health, dictate just 10% of our life experiences and our overall positivity, if you will. And yet we chase the happiness that's in that, just that 10%. So an example of happiness is like, I'm going to eat that extra piece of chocolate, or I'm going to buy that new car and it's going to feel amazing. But deep down, while it feels great in the moment, we know that it can't last, right? Eventually we'll have a sugar crash, maybe some guilt for having that chocolate, and that new car smell is going to fade. But joy, on the other hand, is just an entirely different energy. Joy is something that we can only feel when we're fully present in the moment, and it's fully self-sourced. And the good thing about that is because if our overall experience is only dictated by our external circumstances by 10%, the other 90% is up to us. So that's the part that we actually can control. Joy, it's not fleeting. It's got a slower burn to it because it's self-sourced. It's, like an example of joy, I'd say is like, it's the 3 C's. So they're really broad buckets, but you can usually find joy in creativity. So not just things like art and music, but in movement. If you look at a professional athlete, they really get creative about, all right, if I do this layup this way, all right, what if I try it this way? What if I try it this way? There's a lot of creative, critical thinking that goes into what it means to create an expertly executed, layup or free throw or what. I don't know what the terms are. I'm not a sports person per se, but there's a lot that goes into that, right? So creativity is one bucket. Cooking, that's another one. Community, where you are a part of something bigger, a cause that's bigger, or a purpose that's bigger. Things like saving the environment, or helping a specific cause, illiteracy or hunger, whatever. You come together in community to create change for the positive that goes beyond just you. And then connection to yourself, and connection to other people. So that kind of feeds into community, and creativity can actively play in any of those things. And connection can look like taking a moment to breathe for yourself, just meditating, moving, really getting in touch with who you are and your values. But connection to the way you and I got to connect over dinner and just have a heartfelt conversation. Those are the moments where joy lives. And you can come back to those moments at any time.
I love that. I think as you were describing that, I was thinking of my wife, who, has had things that she's endured in life. And there's different ways to think about like someone who's happy or positive all the time as like this one type of thing, but you don't have to be that to experience joy. She's not an optimist or a pessimist. She describes herself as a realist. But, you can be that and still in the moment of something that you're doing that you are becoming better at, like you said, or whatever it happens to be, connecting, you can experience joy. You don't have to be glasses half full or glasses half empty. It kind of applies to everyone. I'd never really thought about that before.
Yeah. Well, you're not outcome dependent then, right? Like the outcome is so beyond what your control is. And so when you focus on the joy, even with how you approach time freedom, I always tell people it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So for listeners who are looking to create that time freedom, if you're going about it from this, like, then I'll be happy if I have time freedom, if I can just get there, versus how can I really truly feel a sense of alignment and joy, purpose, values as I create this, because the time freedom is going to be what enriches my life. It's just 2 totally different approaches, and the outcomes and the experience as you go to create it will be there, and you'll actually get there faster. I mean, that feeling of freedom that you're looking to create, if you're always telling yourself, like, I'm not there yet, if I can just hit that goal, then I'll be able to take that extra day off. If I can just hit that bank account balance, then I might be able to blah, blah, blah. Versus I've got this bigger ideal and I'm going to experience it in the moment, even if it's just 5 minutes of time freedom today, that eventually will compound into maybe a day or 5 days or 5 months, whatever that looks like. It will make just such a massive difference. And then from a medical standpoint, even just nurtures your well-being instead of taxing it and creating, if you have time freedom and you've worried yourself sick in the process of getting there, what was the point?
So I just love hearing your journey through all of this as we've talked, because I think it's helpful for those that are listening. I'm still curious though, like, you're living with some time freedom right now. Like, where are you 10 years from now? You'll be what? Not quite 50s, middles of your 50s.
Early 50s. Yeah.
Early 50s. When you said that before, I thought when people would describe I would describe how old I was, only until I turned 49 did I say my upper 40s. Because you could still argue 48 was mid 40s. So I totally get what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean,
although my father would always tell people he was 5 years older than he was. And I wondered about that. It's because he's like, I look good. right? Don't I look good for that age? And I'm like, I think I need to do that. I need to start telling people I'm 55 and then be like, whoa.
I wouldn't.
There might be something to that. They did a study. There's this book called The Happiness Advantage by Dr. Sean Aker. Fantastic read. It's Harvard. He's a Harvard researcher, if you haven't heard of him. And he does a lot of there's a lot of evidence in the book, but it's not a dense read. It's actually quite easy to read. He does it beautifully. And he talks about there's this study where it's the power of belief. And they took a group of 70-something-year-old men and they isolated them and they all the pictures on the walls, all the newspapers, everything that they interacted with was dated to 19, whatever it was that was 20 years. It would make them 20 years younger than they actually were. And at the end of whatever time period, I think a week or two, I don't remember, they took pre and post vital signs and other data points. And these people were feeling less pain. They were experiencing lower blood sugar spikes and, lower blood pressure, things like that. Their bodies had literally reverse aged just because they were thinking of themselves in a younger capacity. Isn't that nuts?
It is nuts. And it's also great news because do you feel this way? Do you feel like in your brain you're younger than you actually are? Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
I don't feel like
27.
I don't think I'm in my 20s. I'm thinking in my 30s, but still that's way younger than 49 and a half.
Yeah.
Well, I'm barely in my 30s, so.
Yeah. But 27 was a great year for me. So I totally agree with this 27 business. But I think it's just so telling. And again, how are you going to experience your time freedom? If you're going to think of yourself as old and you're behind the curve versus look how good I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm doing it, so
But
good.
anyway, I think I was asking you before we got on our excellent sidetrack was 10 years from now. How do you see time freedom then?
Okay.
In your life?
I feel like there will be more of a travel component right now. There are still constraints. My kids go to public school, and so we can't just take off whenever we want. I am looking to create more opportunities to travel with my husband when we can. Invite the then grown children along to join. If they can, great. If they can't, that's fine. But I want, as I grow my speaking career, I want to be able to go to these really cool, beautiful places and speak and connect with other like-minded people who want to change the world. What else? I actually do want to do some ballroom dancing. My husband's not a dancer. And in my mind, am I totally want to put on those heels and that ball gown. I'm normally in sweats, and there's a real, I don't know, I want to learn Italian and become more fluent in Spanish, and I want to improve my Hindi, and just there's all the things that I want to do. All the things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had that same thought around speaking. Yes, let's get a keynote in Paris and then just spend an extra 3 weeks there.
Yeah.
That's my vision board thing. I've never done a vision board, but if I did a vision board, that would be on it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. What have I not asked you about?
Okay. So there's one thing that I want to touch on real quick if we have a few moments, which is
go for it.
The topic of privilege.
Yes.
Because when people hear about things like time freedom, or when they hear about things like my whole premise and how I live life is you've got to put joy first. And joy is the strategy for creating your next competitive edge, your next level of fulfillment, your next level of self-actualization, whatever that success looks like for you. And one of the things that people tell me is, well, you can only do that because you have privilege. And for a while, I felt really icky about that. Like I had done something wrong, or that I maybe didn't earn it. But then I started looking around and I thought, no, all of us have some level of privilege. Some of us we were born into it. Some of us have built it brick by brick. Whether it's the fact that you have working ears or eyes that can see, or a voice that can be used, you're able-bodied. Maybe it's your network, your education, your grit, your ability to commit to something, your passion for something. Those are all markers of some levels of privilege that others don't have. And I feel like so often the privilege it gets conflated with entitlement, right? So what I mean by that is that when you have privilege and you do nothing about it and you're not living in your purpose, to then serve somebody who needs your resources, your network, your help, your support, now you're living in entitlement. And that's what we see out in the world is these people who claim to be influencers or they're famous or they lead countries and they've got a lot of money and the influence is used from a place of entitlement rather than connection and actually doing something that's going to serve all people, not just some. And so I've just gotten to the point now where I'm like, no, my privilege, I'm actually very proud of it because I've created that privilege. And it's my intention to make sure that I help somebody else along the way. It's important for me to celebrate that privilege because that's what allows me to do the work that I do. Otherwise, I'm burning myself out and no one gets fed. So why would I, it just doesn't serve me to continue to feel negatively about that.
And I was just thinking too, even if you didn't build it brick by brick and you were born a white, tall man like myself, like I guess it wasn't my choice to have privilege. It's just what you do with it. Like if you're able to use it for good, that's great. Like you said, if you're using it for bad or out of entitlement, then that's a totally different, totally different thing.
It's when you use it responsibly, it's a gift.
Yeah. Cool.
I love that.
Please tell our listeners where they can learn more about you.
So you can learn more about me on my website. It's drseemadesai.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us and all of your insights around a very specific scenario that's actually quite applicable to a lot of people who are trying to figure this all out. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you again really soon.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brian and Kirby. It's been such a joy.
Yes. And I just want to thank you too for acknowledging your postpartum depression journey. That is not talked about. And I also had postpartum depression. And so I just appreciate that you brought that up. And then I also love like the intentionality that you have around joy specifically. I hadn't heard that like separated out before. So I really love that. And
yeah, thanks. Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
It's always such a contentious, like, do you bring it up? Do you not bring it up? Because people can get really uncomfortable. And if they're kind of still in the thick of it, it can be really hard to hear about other people's journeys. So, but I do think we need to talk about it. And there's this weird space where when we rely on the men or the male energy in our life, I think there's a really, really necessary act that we can do when we're talking about what it means to parent or lead in that way. To talk about these things because it's just creating awareness and importantly, trusting that when we are vulnerable, that the men in our lives can actually hold space for it. It doesn't need to make anybody uncomfortable. It doesn't need to be put off as like flighty or emotional or too much. I think that we can trust the men in our lives to be there for us and support it so that we can create more allies and more movement forward. So yeah, thanks for acknowledging that, Kirby. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you, Brian, for holding that space.
Absolutely. All right, Kirby, what stuck with you?
Yes, that was such a good podcast. And I was just like, I felt like I was so just in it. So I didn't have a lot to say.
That's great.
And I really love their intentionality behind it. Both of them coming from high stress jobs. And then also, she even mentioned like what kind of work her husband does as a pediatric doctor and in the worst case scenario, and just the perspective that he brings of, you get to do these things. And I think that that's one thing, especially in NLP, is that you get to do these things. You don't have to do them. It's a very conscious or unconscious or conscious choice, I guess, maybe a mix of both. And that the one thing that I highlighted in my notes here was that she said that she's choosing from a place of empowerment. And that is so different than choosing from a place of necessity. And so I just really loved that.
What really stuck with me was how your upbringing sticks with you, right? And you are just a product of this upbringing that you've had. But yet she was still able to recognize it ultimately and based on that make choices. And it's both the ones that you're very acutely aware of, like the high achieving, study hard, all of the pressure that parents put on you, way of being raised. But then also the one that she didn't realize until later, which was the experience, the family friend who did the ballroom dancing and how she wanted to live life that way, even though she didn't realize it in the moment. But all of those things are impacting us. And so, some of them, come to a head clearly, and some of them you have to dig a little bit deeper for. But as you go through the process of realizing what's important to you, they all come out. And then it's what you do with them.
Yes. Yeah. And again, just like the intentionality behind what you do with them is like so cool.
Well, great. Well, another wonderful episode. And again, to all of our listeners, thank you for being there with us. And one way that you can help is to like and subscribe on YouTube and give us an honest review on any podcatcher that you listen to us on. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you next week. Hey, listeners of the podcast, I have a special deal for you. You can now pre-order my book, Time Freedom, if you go to the link timefreedombook.com. And my special is, normally, if you order 3 books, you can get the audiobook free immediately. If you put the promo code podcast, you can order 1 book at your favorite retailer, Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, wherever, and put your order number in the form, put the promo code podcast, and I'll immediately send you the audiobook for free right away. So you don't have to wait. Pre-order the hard copy book, get the audiobook free. Thank you so much for your support. timefreedombook.com.